Welcome to part 6 of a KeySmash Studios Unreal tutorial. In the previous episode, we made it to where when the statues are placed in the correct location, it debugs complete. In this episode, we're going to be changing that out, removing the debug, and having it to where it rotates the door open. We're going to do this through a float curve, so we'll go ahead and create that. And then we'll just name it door animation. So you'll open that up, and to create a new point, you'll just hold down Shift and click, and then we just want this at 0, 0. And then we're going to put our next one at 1, 2. And then we'll just click Auto for these two, and it'll sort of give it a smooth curve. We'll go ahead and save that. That's your curve float. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and go to our C++ classes, and we're going to create a new script. And this script will be an actor. We'll name it door rotator, and we'll create that class. Alright, now that everything's compiled, we'll start in our header. The first thing we're going to do is add an include. And this will be for getting timeline components for our curve. After this, we'll move down to our public, and we'll create a few properties. The first one we're going to create is going to be the property for our curve. We want to be able to grab the one that we just created and utilize that within the script. So we're going to create a category so that way we can easily find where to attach it. And we'll just call this animation. And then it will be a U-curve float. And we'll just call this animation as well. The next property is going to be the value that we rotate the door by. So we'll make this edit anywhere as well. And we'll also stick it in the category of animation. That way, if you wanted to change how much it rotates by, you could, but we're going to go ahead and have our angle that we're rotating by be 115. Then we'll be creating an F timeline, and we'll just call this timeline. And you'll need to make sure to have this include for this to light up. And then we'll create a function, and this function is what we'll call inside our character controller and our check answer function instead of having it debug. So we'll just call this function call animation. And then we'll move on to our private. And we're going to create two rotators. We'll have an initial one. And then we'll have a target one. This will just be what we set at the beginning to show our initial rotation for our actor and then the goal at the end of the rotation. And we'll create a final function. And this, we'll just call this update rotation. And we'll use this function to add constant value to the rotation of the door so it smoothly rotates. One last thing that I forgot to add is up in our public, we need another property. And this will just be our mesh. So that way we can add the door to the actor. So now we'll go ahead and move on to our CPP. We'll begin by going to our constructor and assigning our mesh. So we'll make our mesh equal to the create default sub object, and the sub object will be the static mesh component. And we'll just have the text for this be mesh. From there, we'll move on to our begin play. And what we want to happen is we want to make sure that our animation exists, so no null errors are thrown. So we'll go ahead and create a on timeline float, and we'll call this rotation function. And from there, we'll bind this rotation function to a U function. And we'll have it be this, and it's the function name that we're binding it to is going to be our update rotation function that we made. After that, we'll take our timeline that we made in our header, and we'll add interp float, which interpolation. Next, we'll take our timeline that we made in our header, and we'll call that add interp float, which is just adding a float interpolation to the timeline. And we'll take our animation and our rotation function for the parameters for this. Next, we're going to go ahead and tell our timeline that we want the looping to be false. We want the door to open once. We don't want the door to constantly swing. If you did, however, want whatever you're rotating to swing, you would just put true in that parameter. And then we'll have our initial rotation and our target rotation equal the current rotation of our actor. And finally, we'll take our target rotation, and we're going to take the yaw of it. Yours may be different depending on what you want to do with your door, but for this case it'll be the yaw. There's also pitch and roll. And we're going to plus equals our angle that we already initialized in our header to 115. And that will be our begin play function. The next thing we're going to go ahead and do is create our update rotation function. And this is simply going to have a temporary rotator, and the way we're going to get this is by lerping our initial rotation and target rotation. By our value. And this value is going to go and be our delta time. So inside of tick, we'll put our update rotation, and we'll have delta time be the value that it lerps by. And then finally, we'll set our actor's rotation to this temp rotation. And that'll be our whole update rotation function. So finally, we'll go ahead and go down, and we're going to create our last function, which is our call animation function. And we're going to begin by checking that our timeline isn't currently playing. And if it's not, then we'll go ahead and have our timeline play from the beginning. And that's our whole CPP of our door rotator. So we'll go ahead and go over to our character controller header, and we're going to add the door rotator to the includes. And then we'll go ahead and go over to our character controller and down to our check answer function. And so previously we were saying solved. So after you add that include, you'll just go down to your public. And just anywhere in here, we can add a new property that can be edited anywhere. And we'll have its category be animation. And we're just going to have an actor that will be our animation door. Now we can go over to the CPP, and then inside our check answer function, we'll go ahead and underneath where we previously had that debug, we'll go ahead and cast our door rotator. And then we'll say if this was successful. Then we'll go ahead and call our call animation function. And this will then cause the door to rotate open once our statues are in the correct answer. So we'll go ahead and compile all this code and then test it out. So I accidentally had an extra letter in the static mesh, so just make sure that that is spelled correctly and go ahead and compile again. So our compile completed, so we'll go ahead and go to our door rotator and create a blueprint class based off of it, and we'll just call it door rotator blueprint. And when this opens, we'll just drop in the animation that we've already created. We'll keep the angle where it's at. And then we'll go over to its mesh. We'll go down to its static mesh, and we'll add the door to it. We'll go ahead and save and compile that. And now we can delete this door that we have here. And we'll just drag in this one. We'll rotate it 180 degrees. And so now it should come out to about there. So we'll go ahead and test this out. Actually, before we start, we need to find our door. We'll move it up just for easier keeping into a puzzle piece. And then we need to go to our character controller. And down where we have the door animation, we want to make sure to put our door rotator. Alright, now we can go ahead and test it out. So we'll go collect all of our statues. Can collect the blue light. So we remember red is second, blue is first, so green is third. So go ahead and do blue, then green at the end, and red in the middle. So I figured out the issue. I accidentally called the wrong function inside of tick. So up here we bind our update function with our rotation function, which we then add to our timeline. So we want to make sure that down here we call our timeline, and then we want it to be the tick timeline, and then we want to add delta time. And then we'll go ahead and compile and then test it out one last time. So we'll go ahead and click play. We'll get our blue, our red, and then put them all in the right order, and then as you can see, the door opens now. So this time we made it to where the door swings open using curve floats. Next time we'll be using blueprints to control this light to flash, so we can make Morse code so we can finally escape through this door over here. Thanks for watching, please subscribe, see you next week.